everyone, and welcome to Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics, with a strong emphasis on attempt. We are here, Christy and I are here with a wonderful, extravagant guest, Shannon Q, one of my favorite YouTubers and friends in the community. Say hello, Shannon. Ever.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate being invited. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I just want to say that your background is so pretty, and I have ADD situation going. I'm just like, there's like so much I just want to look at, and yeah.
Do you want to hear the story of where this background came from?
I do.
It's I don't know how interesting it'll be to people, but I was asked to go on a channel called Modern Day Debate to talk to a person called G-Man. You may or may not be familiar.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I was there.
That's the first conversation I ever heard with you.
Was G-Man.
That's the first conversation that Steve set you up on, I think.
Yes, that's one of the first two people I ever talked to on the internet were Dean Esme and G-Man.
Yeah.
Max Colby, Dean Esme, yeah.
Stayed around.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the first one I caught and then backtracked was that first conversations with Shannon Q.
Yep. Yes.
G-Man.
Let's talk about you with Shannon Q. That's right.
Yeah,
I had like 10 of those on Steve McRae's channel. Yeah. That was that was the first one that he set up, and he was like, we're going to make this a series. But anyway, like I didn't talk to G-Man again or interact with him again. And James from Modern Day Debate was like, can you talk to G-Man? G-Man wants to talk to you. Can you talk to G-Man? And I was like, fine, sure. And then he was like, well, G-Man wants you to promise that you won't psychologize him. And I said, I refuse. I said, I refuse to acquiesce to any of his demands. I will either talk to him on my own accord or I will not. And he was like, he's really concerned you're going to psychologize him. So I downloaded a picture of a psychologist's office to be the background. And it's just still on my Zoom.
I love it.
That's where this came from. I was trolling him.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I was trolling the G-Man.
You don't come off as someone who trolls.
No, that's
I was trolling him a little bit.
But you do troll, but yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's different. That's what you call grown folk trolling. It happens to the best of us.
Oh, man.
Hello and happy Friday, everybody in the chat. I see you guys.
Yes, hi,
Come on.
chat.
Yeah, we do. It happens to the best.
Oh, shoot.
Nope.
I'm sorry,
I hurt
guys.
myself. I sound very nasally when I do.
It sounds great, though. It's a good sound for you.
Thanks.
All right. So before we get into things, Shannon, for anyone who doesn't know, can you let everyone know who you are, what you do?
Sure. I am Shannon Q on YouTube. My YouTube channel is called Shannon Q because I have no creativity. And also I didn't think that I would ever have a YouTube channel. So it's just named my name. And I have a YouTube channel with, I think I'm just hitting 16,000 subscribers, like literally right now as I'm sitting here with you guys. And what I do is I engage in complex conversations and try to model more productive dialogues. So I have a background in psychology. I studied psychology, and I also do edited videos where I take on components of religious harm and kind of break down from a psychological perspective why they may be harmful, what evidence there is that they might be harmful, things like Christian counseling, for example. And I do some edited videos and some conversations, kind of a 70-30, I guess, more heavily on the conversations, but 30% edited videos, but 70% conversations. So if you're interested in conversations on a broad array of topics, from religious philosophy to abortion and everything in between, with people who are diametrically opposed to my position, I like to find people that completely disagree with me. And sometimes people who do that are just subject matter experts who have topics that I find interesting. Like I just spoke to Erica, who's Guts at Gibbon, who's fantastic about the evolution of cognition in primates, which was a really interesting conversation. That was a really cool conversation. I love her. Yeah, then maybe go check me out if you haven't seen me already. And I also have a Twitter account. I wouldn't suggest following that. That place is a dystopian wasteland of
I love it.
My Twitter's a shit show. I'm sorry. It's a gong show. My Twitter is
free speech on
Woo!
LEAH.
I have a no block policy and it shows.
You're the best part of Twitter. I have.
Oh, you're sweet.
Yes.
I don't know that that's the case.
No,
Thank you.
every once in a while reading, I'm like, oh.
I only get notifications for like all tweets for like less than 5 people, and you are one of those people.
Thank you. Or I'm sorry. Probably I'm sorry.
It's a delight, I have to say.
It is. Like, because
depends on perspective, I guess.
Like your channel. I mean, your channel may be a little more so, but like you navigate conversations so well. You're like an Olympic swimmer in like water when you're like having these difficult philosophical conversations, and that's what I really appreciate about you, because I can barely talk, as you can see.
Back is saying he likes it when you backstroke on the asses.
I had a wonderful conversation with Mac about moral philosophy on a channel like ages ago. So don't cut yourself slack. That was a wonderful conversation. I gained a lot from that conversation. So I really feel like you need to give yourself more credit.
I agree.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I agree
very much.
wholeheartedly with that statement. Yeah. Max is smart cookie, and
He is.
No, I just act like it. And sometimes it pays
really
off.
Good actor.
Same.
That's all we do here on YouTube. All right. So I want to get into more of what you do soon, but I do want to go ahead and turn it over to news stuff, which I mentioned before we went live, because that's going to be like a little more of a difficult situation to like talk about, and it's going to be like infuriating. So if we cool off on like the fun part, I think that'd probably be better instead of like letting you leave mad. So, all right.
Oh, I'll still leave mad.
So for anyone who doesn't know, for everyone who already knows, I ran the big hot topic all this like last 2 weeks, more or less, and the whole thing's been a shit show. The whole thing. There's a lot we could go over, and we're gonna try to shorten it up because we want to do a deep dive on the entire situation, and we just don't have time to right now. We have Shannon Q on with us this week, and then next week we have Eddie Spaghetti. He's part of Anthony Magnabosco's crew. So he's going to come on and talk about SE with us, straight epistemology. So that will be super duper fun. I'm really excited about that. But since we have these wonderful guests, we can't really do a deep dive. But we do want to quickly give a little recap of what's gone on with the U.S. and Iran, and also with other countries and Iran because of the plane crash. So, Christy, is there anything you want to jump in and say before I try and give a little lowdown?
Yes, I am doing my due diligence, even though we're not covering it this week or next. I am. I have so many notes, and I got a new phone yesterday, and I'm not technologically literate, so bear with me. I've had to run into my daughter's room, who's 21, and be like, "Help! What am I supposed to do?"
She's good.
Multiple times. So I want to also utilize it in my notes, so I can use it. So I'm doing that too. At the same time, I have quite a big notebook full of what I will be using for when I do my deep dive into this, and I'm going to be starting in the 70s. So if you guys know anything about Iran's history and our history with coups d'etats across the planet, I think that will, you can't, none of this happened in a vacuum. And I am a policy junkie. I think that for me, there's nothing better than spending a day with nothing to do with reading policy. I know that sounds silly, but I really like it, and I feel like it's so important. And there's so many policies that are on the books that are involved with Iran, and it starts way back when. So we'll be doing an in-depth, and if you're interested in reading any of the things that I have in this folder that I will be pulling from, I can post those on LEAH so you guys can read up too, and then you guys can probably tell your friends, like, here's what we know, instead of, I feel this way, because I have a lot of family members who, America, fuck yeah. And I get it, but at the same time, I don't love this country more than the rights of people in another part of this world. Like, I don't
Right.
get that. I can't. And so I do have to wrap my mind around the fact that these family members who I love they feel like past administrations that we've had that say that 500,000 children dying, that cost is worth it for the end result. And I don't feel that way. So I'm coming from it biased, and I admit that. Human rights are the most important. So I'm starting in the 70s, and you're going to get lots of that. So I just want, I hope that you are ready. It's not going to be an opinion piece either. It's just going to be what I found to be true and what I have to show that these are the things I know.
Yeah, and you really have to start from the 70s. And we didn't talk back and forth on this at all yet. Hardly at all. Like what we're going to cover, at least. But you do actually have to start from the 70s. I agree. And like talk about the history of Iran and U.S. relations. And just like to talk about anything with Iran. It's kind of like anywhere else in the Middle East and in South America. Like when there's any kind of conflict, you have to look at the history and why there's conflict and what kind of economic sanctions there are on a country, which is crippling said country, and why people are acting out and who caused it and all that. Like the stuff runs deep, and it's really, really it's never fucking black or white.
When you say that we attempt to apply logic and reason, I think that that's huge. That no matter what story it is, if I'm talking about a conservative perspective, I try to put myself in their shoes so I can understand how they feel that way. So with Iran, it's going to be no different. I'm going to be trying to put myself in the citizens, this is the history they know. And just because we don't know en masse, the history, it doesn't mean that they don't. So they're coming from, there's a story, and I was going to share it tonight. I might as well just share it right now. A friend of mine who I've known for a long time, his name is Vincente. He is writing a piece that he wants to come on and share with LEAH. And it's going to be, he sent me this, link, and it was all these families in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran. They grew up with this fear of the sound in the sky. I mean, pit of the stomach, kids throwing up, can't think, can't do their homework because of the drone sound in the sky. And it took me a whole day of just thinking, like, I have kids. I can't, what do you tell them? How do you tell them that, I can't, I'll just start crying. It really knocked my socks off. And he said, can I write something about it? And I said, well, yes. So that's coming too, and to put ourselves in their shoes. We can, from a cockpit in Ohio or in the desert in the States, comfortably push a button and annihilate a village. And I think that being a fact of warfare today, it's nice for me, I think for everyone, to humanize the people that are on the end of that joystick. I don't see how anything bad can come from humanizing the people that are on the end of that joystick.
Right. And that's something that tends to give you the difference between a reaction and a response to like any of this news. Like you need to try to be as informed as possible before you respond to anything. And I wish that the U.S. had done that a lot more before.
Wish people
we
in general
ratcheted
would
things
do
up
that.
like we did.
Yeah. all
Yeah.
people. And with power comes great responsibility, and you can say whatever you want about the states.
Where's my Spider-Man
We
stuff?
have over 800 military bases. Obviously, we have the might, and with that comes, it sounds corny, but extraordinary responsibility. And I think that we totally dropped the ball.
Right, and I just think we shouldn't have that much responsibility. We shouldn't have that much power.
Nobody.
We should be sharing a lot more because you know.
And there's no such thing as a good empire. There's no such thing. You can't become an empire. You know.
Yeah. So that said, we will with the Soleimani, the I'm not even going to call it that. I'm the protest at the Baghdad embassy, the history between Iran and Western society, and all of that here in the next couple weeks. We don't quite know when, but we will get into that. But we do want to discuss the plane crash, or that's not even really doing it justice. The plane that was shot down by, you said 2 missiles, Shannon?
Yeah, it was hit by 2 missiles, not 1,
Okay.
2.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I
Anti-aircraft
had only
missiles
seen
land
the one. Yeah.
Hit by 2, according to everything that I've been following the past couple of days on the Canadian side, because we're incredibly interested, because 63 of our citizens are dead.
Yeah. And that,
2 of whom are current students at my alma mater, at my university, who were in the finance program doing their PhDs, sisters. I should have looked up their name before I came on. I'm sorry that I don't have them. I wish I did. But yeah, yesterday there was vigils all the way across Canada. Our capital was filled with lights. The downtown of my capital, Halifax, here in Nova Scotia, was filled with lights and vigils and people remembering our 24-hour news cycle. You know what's funny is there's such a difference between our 24-hour news cycle and yours. Our 24-hour news cycle was interspersing the information that was available with remembering the victims. Like they were doing interviews with the victims' family and humanizing the people that had died so that they could be remembered. And our country unified, like from Vancouver all the way to Halifax.
Yeah.
And everywhere in between, whether there was a victim in that city or not, everybody was out.
Yeah.
Just supporting the families and the communities that are affected by this, because it's hard. So for people that maybe don't know, there was a flight that was taking off from the airport in Iran, and the flight was scheduled to go to the Ukraine and then back to Canada. Mm-hmm. I think that they were transferring flights in the Ukraine to go back to Canada. It made it not even 6,000 feet, and it was hit by a surface-to-air missile. There's not video of the first missile hitting it, but the plane turned around to go back to the airport, and the people took out their cameras, obviously, because that's not something that happens maybe around there it happens more often than not, but it's not something that happens every day. So you can see the plane on fire through the air heading back to the airport, and then you get to see it hit by missile number 2. Mm. As it's going back. This is a passenger liner.
Right.
Yeah.
A passenger liner that was taking off from an airport in Iran. This was about an hour and a half after the strikes that Iran did on the Iraqi military bases in retaliation for the strikes that killed their general. So we don't know yet, and we're super not reactionary here in Canada. We're mad, but we're waiting to find out what the fuck happens.
Yeah,
but
people are fairly upset.
At first they said that there was an electrical or a technical error on the plane, but then the videos came out and the intelligence came out where they could see that it was shot down.
Yeah.
And I had to admit, so we hit it, but that was a technical error.
Right.
And it was a misfire. And then it came out that it was hit twice. And they're like, it was two technical errors.
Yeah.
Like when you realize the first one takes place, do you maybe not say, oops? Seems to me like that, like this is entirely speculation, but it seems to me like this had just happened. They had just struck Iraq. Maybe they weren't communicating well between who was taking off from the airport and who was controlling the surface to air missiles. And they were like, oh shit, a plane. We just shot a bunch of missiles. Maybe we should protect ourselves. Somebody might be coming for us, and just started firing at it because they didn't know what the hell it was. And they didn't bother to try to figure it out because everybody's in a heightened state.
Right.
Because reasons, I guess. They shot down a passenger liner. And so now there's, I think, what was it, 167 people total?
Yes. That's
or
exactly
more.
Right.
That's the first number I heard. I heard a different number, but
63 are Canadian. Yes.
Yeah, but the plane itself, I think, is 167.
176.
176. I got it inversed. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes. Let's say it was a mistake. Let's say it was a total accident. How do you never do this? This isn't, planes just have been in the air for 5 years and no one knows. We're still figuring it out. This isn't like that. And like you said, why weren't they grounded? Why weren't all airports alerted that there's this stuff going on? There's missiles. I don't know, because the countries who lost the most aren't even involved in this.
No. I mean, I know there were a lot of Iranians, there were a lot of Ukrainians, there were a lot of Canadians, and then there were a few Germans, and then a few other, like, there were like three Germans, and then there was 3 from another country. And like the two sisters, as soon as I saw those numbers, all I could imagine was like, okay, well, that was like a family.
Yeah.
Right.
So many families, 176, well, 175, because 2 are sisters. Families are totally changed forever.
Yeah. So there's a lot of mourning going on around the world because of that right now, and it's Iran
says the black box is damaged.
Right. It's very convenient.
But
that the Ukraine will have access to it? I don't know the answer to that, but that the Ukraine will have access to the black box. And they also say most of the 63 Canadians were dual citizens. They were Canadian citizens who also held citizenship in Iran. So they're refusing to release anything to the Canadian government because they say it's an internal domestic issue. You're not entitled to any information, despite the fact that these people are Canadian citizenships now, because Iran doesn't recognize dual citizenship.
Right.
They don't recognize it. Canada does.
Citizens, that's the part that everyone needs to remember, is that they're just like you and me. They have nothing to do with, humans. As far as we know. Now, I could be totally wrong. There could be some, 007 spies. Who knows?
Yeah.
But for the most part, these are just moms and dads and brothers and sisters and daughters and sons this is who war hurts. And I don't think that any answers we get from any of this is ever going to make any of it better.
Right. And I feel like Iran, obviously they need to tread this lightly. Like they need this to go well because of the tensions that were already there. But the other reason, which is not being talked about enough, I think, is this happened to them. Like the U.S. shot down a plane of theirs in 1988.
Yes.
And they remember that morning.
Check.
Like every year, like on the anniversary of it. So they should take this, like, knowing how hard it is for other people involved, and really try to be as open as they can. I understand why they would keep the black box or black boxes away from other Western countries like right away, but just because like if it wasn't their fault, they wouldn't want anyone with evidence.
And had to be a goddamn Ukrainian plane too. Of all the million, like of all the other countries that it could have been, it's a Ukrainian goddamn plane. Like you got an impeachment going on centered around Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They shoot down a Ukrainian plane. So the only other people who are entitled to access to that block are the goddamn Ukraine.
Yep.
Like, what are the odds that they're shooting down a Ukrainian plane, the center of the other most major controversy that you guys have going on?
Yeah.
Like, there's way too many ducks in a row for it to be like, wow, this is just a whole bunch of coincidence. I remember when it first happened, I was like, I sent a message to some friends that are American, and I was like, can you please tell your president to go himself? And they're like, he didn't shoot down that plane. I'm like, he initiated the confluence of events that led to this taking place because of his incompetence. And they're like, well, it was technical error. And the next day I was like, oh, dear. They meant well. Like they they were just going with the information that they had at the time. But there's just how can people look at all of these coincidences and be like, they're all just coincidences? There's a technical error on surface-to-air missile just with this plane that shot it twice, and it happened to be one of the only Ukrainian planes that's taking off from the airport as the U.S. is in a debacle with the Ukraine.
Right.
An hour and a half after they shoot Iraqi military bases in retaliation to a U.S. airstrike. That's a lot of weird goddamn coincidences.
Yeah. It is. And it's going to take a long time before regular people like you and I have enough actual information. And it might even take taking the government to court from Freedom of Information Act, as us civilians always have to do if we want to know anything. I think history is going to look back at this time. There's I don't want my monkey brain always wants to go too many coincidences. And I don't know. I can't say that I know. I do know that none of this is normal. And I am very curious.
I'm not saying I know anything's connected, but like when there's that many coincidences and there's this many pieces involved, you should at least attempt to be a little bit more transparent than you are. Like provide some sort of information to let people know what the hell is going on.
Right. Yeah, unless this is some sort of top secret thing that they're trying to cover up real quick, which why would it be? Why would these civilians, and maybe, like I said, maybe there was 2 people on there that they needed to end. And we don't know.
Find a better way than shooting down a plane with 176 people on it.
Yeah. Or assassinating a military leader at an international airport in another sovereign country. I mean, we could just keep going and going and going. And when you know the track record of not just Trump, he's another one, but of the American war machine. If you know every war that we're still in, we're bombing 8 countries today. The United States of America, the Pentagon is bombing 8 countries. And I know for a fact the last time the United States declared war the legal way, went through Congress and declared war, was 1941.
Wow.
Yeah, figure that out.
So you guys are just in a bunch of illegal wars right
all
now.
The fucking time.
Think about Abu Ghraib and all these black site prisons. They're all illegal prisoner of war. All of them. And if the International Criminal Court wasn't bought and paid for by the Pentagon, we could actually have some justice. They could come in and say, no, these are war crimes. And underneath the Nuremberg trial, underneath these laws that you helped set up, this is a war crime.
So you guys in China can just essentially do whatever.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't agree with that. I am vehemently against this.
This goes back to the first thing that we said in this conversation. With great power comes great responsibility, and I don't think we need that responsibility or that much power. When we have conflicts like this with other countries, I have a strong belief that we should do things like with the UN. We should go and like group effort.
Yes, the most democratic way possible.
Yes. Took the words right out of my mouth. So I just, because we don't need to be the one guy carrying a big ass stick telling people what to do. We just don't.
That's what we do. Our military is an active peacekeeping force more than it is a combat military.
As it should be. As it should be. I am 100% against offensive wars or offensive military actions. I think the only justified reason for a military to do anything with force is to defend. And when was the last time a country came in and we needed to defend ourselves as Americans? Think about Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, now that you got a good taste, Shannon, of what we usually talk about.
I watch your show. I know what you usually talk about.
I appreciate that. I know you're a very
I'm usually in bed though. I stayed up.
Yeah, no, I
usually watch you guys at work on Mondays.
Oh, thank you. Thank
you for making good content. That's worth listening to.
Yay.
Cool. So, that said, because I know you're not a huge fan of politics, so I wanted to try to stay away from it, like a bit, or at least go about it in like a roundabout way, to where you totally wouldn't notice.
Okay.
But so far, that hasn't worked.
I noticed.
Yeah, you did.
I noticed. I picked up on it.
We're not very slick.
So we will get back to totally not politics here in a little bit, and totally in a roundabout way. But the first thing I want to ask you is, why do you do what you do on your channel and on your dumpster fire of a Twitter account?
Oh gosh,
which I love. I roast marshmallows over it a lot.
Yeah.
A lot,
man. Though.
My Twitter is just a dystopian wasteland. There's a lot going on my Twitter. So it's an interesting question because I never meant for either to be as big as they are, I guess. I started a Twitter account because I wanted to follow the people that I enjoyed on YouTube and in the atheist community. And I started, and so that I could engage with theist ideas and kind of like cut my teeth that way, because I was the type of person that I was kind of sitting at home going, oh, if I had a chance, I'd say this. And that's easier said than done, right? So I thought I'd, give it a try. And I just kind of entered into the community organically just because I like participating in conversations. So I just found my way to channels where conversations were happening and was like, hey, maybe I can have a conversation, and just started doing that. And I accumulated 1,000 subscribers before I even posted a video.
Oh, I know. I was one of them.
Oh, yay.
Sure. Like, why not?
Thank you.
I had seen you on other platforms, on other channels, and I was like, wherever she's gonna be more of, I need to subscribe to that.
God, that's so sweet.
I think you filled such. I imagine the Shannon Q in my head, at the end of a week of handling trolls and raising peanut butter, like all the, not peanut butter, the presents, all the drives and activism that you've done. I just, in my head, I imagine you being at the end of the week, yep, this is why I do it. Which I'm sure that's
so burnt out.
my animated brain. I think that you are a literal superhero.
You're silly. Thank you. That's
you
way
do everything in the way I see it for the right reasons. You do them because you want to make the world a little bit better than the way you found it, and there's no other better reason to me to do anything. So I think that's why people flock to you, because it's a genuine wanting to help and being able to You know, I want to help too, but I can't talk to everybody. I could never talk to Matt Slick. Ever. No.
I haven't talked to him yet.
No,
Not
but
yet.
you would have a,
Oh, I would.
and I would go listen, but I wouldn't be able to. No, not at all. And I don't have a temper, but I would end up just like laughing and hanging up on him. Like I couldn't do it.
See,
I like finding out the way people think, because I think a lot of what goes on with the conflicts that we see is because people want to win conversations, right? They want to go in and, you know, say, this is why I'm right and you're wrong and you're dumb and I'm amazing. And that's, I want people to be able to see where they're alike and where they differ, and where you think somebody has a problematic idea or a problematic ideology, which is even more powerful and a little bit worse. The way to deconstruct that and compel them to think differently is to understand why they think that way to begin with. And just telling them you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong doesn't bring you to the realization of why they think they're right. Why they think they're right is important. They get there somehow. Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to be an asshole because it's fun. Well, maybe some people do, but not very many, and not in droves, right? So what's interesting to me is figuring out how human people who want to be good, who feel like they are good, can hold ideas that are in such contrast to mine and people that I know that I agree with, and still retain their humanity and how they justify those positions, and trying to figure out how I can point out to them, or maybe learn myself where I might need to change slightly, or where they can see the flaws in how they got to where they were. And one of the reasons I started the channel in the way that I did was, one, I love charity work. I just love it. I love it. That's what I do. In real life, I'm an avid volunteer, and I do consistent charity work, like just all the time. I just love contributing. Yes, I am. That's a personality trait, though. Yeah, I'm intensely competitive, but yeah, like in real, I wanted to be able to bring that in, but my main goal was to try to create a space where there was conversations instead of arguments. I was seeing a lot of arguments and a lot of debates and a lot of fights, and less like real legitimate conversations that were meant to ostensibly kind of bring people to an understanding of each other's perspective. And to some people, like there's value in the other type of interaction as well. Like some people, it shakes them out, right? But it was frustrating to me. Like I was watching people have arguments, and I was like, I want to know why they think this way. I want to know what they think on this topic. I want to know how they got there. I want to know why you think differently. And I wasn't figuring it out because everybody was too busy, you know, measuring their dicks on
I feel like you came right at the time, and I'm sure for Mac too, because we have talked about this particular thing. Atheism is a part. I don't have any beliefs in any kind of magical anything anymore, and I used to, so I understand that. But I got to a point where I've always been the type where, well, is there more to learn? Like, what else can I do? Painting.
What now?
Learn that. What else can I do? Crocheting, reading. I've always been that way. And so once I was like, okay, I got over the shock of letting all that go, and God, I was so wrong about everything. Once that went away, it was, what else? And so it was right at the time where there were content creators saying atheism plus is bullshit, you know, and then there were SJW, anti-SJW, and there were still these conversations going on, these debates going on, and I felt like, I don't know how to communicate like you, but I had those same feelings like, well, what else? I feel like there's all these missed opportunities during these conversations, because you could score a point and that's good or whatever. But now what? Like, what if you could help him, or the 15 people that are watching, 3 of them go, oh, wow. And so I just feel like that's right when Enter Shannon came in, and it was like, oh, okay. Yes, and you would talk to people that most people would never talk to. And it would be, I learned stuff from them even if it wasn't learning something that I could use in my life, it was learning how to understand them and not judge them for something I thought was just deplorable because they weren't thinking it was bad. Like I said, I'm not a communicator like you. I think that you did enter, and that's another reason why Mac and I want to talk about the things that we want to talk about, is because then what? Now that we come to the understanding that we were wrong about all this, we still care and we still want to be good people. And so how do we do that? Acknowledging we're atheists. And we just, I guess humanism was kind of both how we found that. And I think that your conversations are, or your
format for conversations, and
that willingness to go, okay, I'll grant you that, even though I'm like, well, I'm listening to you, no, don't give that to him, he's an asshat.
I get that a lot. People don't really understand why I'm doing it, and I'm doing it because I'm preventing an escalation so that I can get to the next phase. Because a lot of the time, that's where the conversations get caught up, because you hear somebody say something like, well, if Bill Gates rapes you, then you should be thankful. Like, that happened to me in a conversation because, because based on biblical standards, he would own you and then you would be better off than you are now. You have to be able to swallow that and go, okay, they're saying that because this is the point where they need the conversation to escalate, because maybe they can't defend it at this point and they want it to descend into just anarchy, because then they don't have to deal with the breakdown of, okay, why did you say that? And what does that mean? And do you see why that might be problematic if you look at it from this, like, you need to be able to sometimes, and there's value in the other type too, and the really pressing, there's value in that. Like, you need a diversity of strategy, but I didn't see my type represented really anywhere when it came to conversations. And the other component that's really important to me is like the what now. Like, there was an inundation of atheist channels that were actively contributing to the deconversion of a significant amount of people. Like, people were like, okay, wow, this is I can't hold this belief anymore. And then what happens to them? Like, we have a responsibility to my mind, if we're actively looking to deconvert people, we have a responsibility to figure out and help and support those people when that happens to them, because there's a lot of psychological trauma and familial dynamics that change and relationship dynamics that change. There's a lot of existential crises that go on. There's a lot of self-realization that you need to go through. Like, it's not a small thing for a lot of people. For some people, it's a seamless transition, but for a lot of people, it's jarring. Like, trauma comes up that you did not even realize was trauma because you'd been indoctrinated so heavily that you'd suppressed it, and all of it just starts to surface. And one of the important things to me, and that's why there's links in every single one of my videos to the Secular Therapy Project, to Recovering from Religion, and to the Clergy Project, is because people need to be able to have an outlet for that and a place to look where they can. I'm not a clinician. I'll be clear on that. Apparently I'm not clear. So I heard the other day. I am not a clinician. Wasn't even my field of study, but it's something that's important to me. Mental health is something that it's important to me, and something that I maybe understand maybe slightly better than a lay person. And definitely, I wanted to be able to present resources that people could reference that were fairly academically rigorous, that they could source themselves, and also provide them with a potential community that they could reach out to, that wasn't just about arguing about whether or not religion was right or wrong, but was about what do you do when you find out that it wasn't true, or at least wasn't true for you, and where do you go from there? And there's not as much of that. Like, a lot of those people are just flailed to the wind, and that's not necessarily okay. And the last thing I wanted to do on my channel, and I'm really sorry I feel like I'm just taking up air.
Keep going.
But the last thing I wanted to do on my channel is I find a lot of people believe a narrative construction, especially on platforms like this, because they start to trust people, they start to trust creators. I wanted to work towards encouraging people to advocate for their own understanding, to check my sources, fact check me, learn where I got the information. Don't just read an article because that article might be proposed by a pundit that's misrepresenting information. Purposefully or not, go to the source materials, really learn how to discern information, because it's all of our responsibility to make sure that what we're regurgitating, what we've consumed, that we're now regurgitating into the world is accurate and founded on something that's substantial, and not just something that sounded right to us at the time because we liked the presentation.
Right.
That was really important to me. And that's unilateral. That's outside of atheism and deconversion. I just think that's just a good message that people should have.
There's another really big takeaway there between what you're talking about and what we usually cover on the show. Is anything worth knowing or understanding is not easy to know or understand. Like, you need to dig through the layers. You need to do a lot of research to do your videos. Paul needs to do a ton of research to do his videos.
He doesn't sleep.
I believe you.
He doesn't.
Christy,
I'm not even kidding.
She does so much. All I do to partake in the show is I listen to the news. And this week I've listened to all of my leftist YouTubers, and more Fox News than I've ever listened to. And then just a little bit of in the middle, MSNBC and CNN and stuff. So I just try to get every angle I can.
Yeah.
And then she does the deep dives, because I don't have time to sit down and read. And I'm a slow reader anyways.
So am I.
So between the two of us, we make a show. And she could do it by herself.
Yeah, I want to show you guys. We're putting Christmas stuff away right now. But let's see if I can get. Do you see that stack of books right there? That huge stack? That is every American battle.
Oh, wow.
Every American battle.
I love you.
This is why we love Christy.
I know. So cool.
So before we move on, because I do want to keep the conversation going forward, I do want to say that the way that you had explained it, you want to know why they think the way they do. The people that you talk to concerning religion, usually, but then other philosophies as well. The way that you explained that well over a year ago, I think really helped me decide what I wanted to make my channel about.
Really?
Yeah.
Me? Wait, I described something here?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I think so.
Oh, that's very fun.
Thank you. The gray name and everything, because it's not black and white, and humans are complex.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be right or wrong. It can be in the middle of that and still be okay.
And you were a real big deciding factor, but the main part that I think I'm really remembering and referring to is the atheist flashbacks, because of how I do that show. I don't push back very much at all, as you know. I just see how far the rabbit hole goes, because that's just interesting. And then sometimes if I don't get it, I'm just please explain it to me. I don't get where you were coming from, please. And I think that's what's interesting about all the other all the different religions and religion in general, because I still label myself as an anti-theist.
Me too.
Right, yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm just completely intolerant to religion in every way, shape, or form, because I still appreciate the culture that's behind it. And religion is a huge part of human history. And I'm a humanist, so I have to appreciate that part of humanity, even though I think it's usually the most disgusting part. It's still part of our history, and it's still part of our cultures. And I think that's important to understand it. I just think it's very, it's definitely a net negative to believe in it, is what I really believe. So, but breaking it down like you do, and how I try to when I'm doing that show, I think that's really important, because we gain so much by like listening to Christopher Hitchens debates. But if that's all there ever is,
Right.
like, if there's no other format, there's only so much we can learn and understand.
There's a difference between affirmation that you're right, feeling good, and understanding what other people think and how you might be able to change their perspective. Now, Christopher Hitchens was great, especially when you're coming out, for going, yes, that hit. I feel affirmed. I am right to think the way that I'm thinking. I'm not crazy to think that there's not a God. All of that makes sense. Now, but if it's important to you to shape societies, if it's important to you to influence other people, to be positive contributors to humanity, it's not just enough to say you're wrong. You have to figure out how to convince them to think differently. You have to show them where we diverge and why we diverge, and get them to critically assess if the reason that we're diverging is something that's valuable to you. Figure out which way you're going to go on the fork in the road, and like really think about it.
Yeah.
You can't do that by just saying you're wrong. You have to try to really subtly get in there with, well, if you are wrong and you're behaving in accordance to a wrong belief, and that has negative impact, what does that mean? And how do you feel about it? But until you can really dig down to how they feel about anything, and how they got there, and why they believe what they believe, and how they reconcile it, you can't. No, people don't just think I'm right or I'm wrong. I'll act this way or I'll act that way. It's significantly more complex than that. And most people are just so determined to want somebody to be proved wrong so that they can be affirmed that they're right. They're not thinking about, okay, maybe this person is wrong, but isn't horrifying as a human, and just really thinks they're right. And you can influence that to change. You can compel them, you can convince them, but sometimes it takes a subtle approach. And until you know why they think the way they do, you can't even develop that approach.
Right. And sometimes they don't understand the way that they think about it. It's like, this is again kind of reminded me of like the street epistemology stuff, because the way that you dig through the layers, you get to their principle base, you get to why they think that way. And that's what street epistemology does. I reckon you probably like Anthony's videos.
Yeah, Anthony, I like Anthony too. Actually, he gave me an SE shirt when I met him in Texas. I could have worn it.
Super jealous.
I think the reason why I Mac and myself and why you love all of this, I think that the three of us and Anthony share a big part of our lives, and it's way bigger than atheism or anything else. It's that humans matter. They really matter, and I care. And so in order for me to make the world better, not just for me for personal reasons, but for my daughters, my future I can't wait to be a grandma. That's gonna be an amazing part of my life. Are you kidding me? But I don't want to not have, if I say I care, and I know I care, I feel I care, then I have to do more to help that. And I think that that's the biggest reason for me to make a better conversation, a better world, that even just the little one that I live within, is to try to understand how someone came to the decisions that they came to, whether it's religion or not. I lost a best friend to Jehovah's Witness, so I don't understand that. And I didn't when it happened at all. But I am understanding. I am learning that there's this bite model, and that, you know, it had nothing to do with me. I didn't do anything wrong, even though I did everything wrong, actually. I tried to shock her out of it with facts, you know, and if I would have sat back, which I can't change it. It didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I know now then, and I could have done so many things differently, and maybe, who knows, maybe I still would have lost her to the cult, but
it may have been fulfilling a need for her that facts couldn't.
Right. Yeah, big time. You know, in her eyes, the 12 or 6 blood transfusions she had didn't save her life. God did, even though she's Jehovah's Witnesses and that's not allowed. But she wasn't baptized yet, so it's okay. Like, I wanted to shake the shit out of her, and that's wrong. And I know that now. I would never even go at it that way now. At all. You know, I would be there more often and just listen. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Should have balanced that better.
Emotions are never wrong, though. They're just...
I was scared for
something
her.
that you need to... Exactly. There's something that you need to measure against behavior, right? So sometimes we're able to take a moment and live in our emotions and contemplate how we can manifest it in behavior and what the outcomes might be. And sometimes I'm guilty of it too. I've dropped some mics where I should have been patient. I have. I've lost my mind when I should have listened. I've been wrong when I could have been right if I just slowed down for a minute and paid attention to what was going on. Or like, all of us are guilty of that. There's no such thing as a wrong emotion. There's just awareness of how they affect us and what that means, and reconciliation to ourselves that, you know, sometimes we can't control it. Like, we're not automatons. Sometimes something that isn't, you know, controllable takes place, and we just say, you know what? Screw you and the horse you rode in on, and go to hell, and I don't like you anymore. And then the next 15, and then we walk away, and 15 minutes later, we're going, damn it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a bad idea. Right?
That's human nature.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from that experience, and I'll always regret how I handled it. I mean, always. I play it over and over, but I don't play it over and torture myself at all. At all. The old me would have. I would have, you know, I did, it's my own fault. No, it was, this is going to happen a lot with me wanting to help in this part of the brain, and in walking away from bad thinking. And so how can I learn from it? And I did also learn that that's how it happened with her. And it might never, ever happen that way again. Everybody's different. And I think that I will never be done learning this part. I think that
no one will.
Always. I will do something and be like, why did I do it that way? I've learned so much. What's wrong with me?
All day, every day. All day, every day.
I agree with that.
But what you recognize that they're learning opportunities, even though you don't always necessarily have control over your behavior in the moment, and that situations are complex and interpersonal dynamics aren't static. You at least have that recognition to contextualize, and that's a big step. Not a lot of people can even take that step. So you should respect yourself for that, for having that amount of introspection to analyze those moments. And know that that's a learning opportunity. Like, give yourself credit. A lot of people don't even get to that point, and that's a big step.
Yes, I
go, Christy.
I agree with that. And I've used the things that I've learned on things that have nothing to do with religion. Somebody who is telling me, "Hey, look at all these videos. I think the Earth might be flat."
Jesus!
a grown person, you know.
I've talked to them.
Yes, and I care about this family a lot.
I remember your first time talking to a flat earther.
Yes,
that's the first time that I had heard a flat earther.
Yeah. And here in Tampa,
Campbell.
you know, So, but I handled it with,
Oh,
no,
shit.
you're not wrong. And how would you go about actually proving that to yourself? Let's look it up, just totally different. But I did have to back off a couple times with him because I am a mom and he is a dad. And I wanted to be like, but you're a goddamn father. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're not teaching her this stuff, right? You're not showing her. But that wouldn't have helped anything.
Right.
That would have made him feel shameful. And that's awful. Why would I want to do that to anyone? He's just trying to figure out things. And I think my love for humanity really steps in because I feel like, God, education fucking failed you, man. It failed you, and it's not your fault. Fuck them. Let's go try to figure this out ourselves. Yeah.
So
Mac has a point to make.
no, I don't. I want you to make it. Actually, to try to move it forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Why does education? Why does the way that we converse, I guess, but mostly to do with education, like why does it fail us? What are we missing in society that brings us to these rifts where we have flat earthers and like these evangelical like extremists? Like, why do we have these kinds of people that we argue with and have conversations with?
I think that there's an aggregate of issues that lead towards that. You can get so many insights if you like stand-up comics. And I know that sounds crazy, but I love stand-up comedy. And I was watching. Right. Yeah. I was watching a comedian the other day and he said something that hit me and it stuck with me. I think his name's Ronnie Chu. And he said, who knew that access to all of the information that was available for the entirety of humanity would make us stupider?
I think because we're not taught, how to differentiate all the information, all the stuff between this is how we find out which ones go in this department and this is how we let these go. We're just critical thinking. I can speak for myself, was not taught. I learned that as an adult on my own.
Our education system hasn't adapted to the access to information people had. So it used to be that the access to information people had was through like libraries. Like you had to actively search for information because you wanted it. It wasn't available at your fingertips because you were bored. And that's an incredibly different scenario. So before, school was a way to deliver facts so that people would know things, just facts, just rote memorization.
I agree.
It wasn't it didn't teach people a way to discern what is or is not factual. It just gave them facts. Yeah. And then they go out into the world and they're told, well, those aren't facts. And actually, here's alternative facts. Like here's other facts. Here's facts that contradict those facts. But they're not taught the methodologies that lead to factual information. They're just given factual information and told to believe it. And people aren't built that way. And now they have access to a world of information. 98% of that information is just bullshit that came out of some idiot's head like mine. Like, that's why I want people to fact check me. I could be wrong. I have biases. I'm an idiot. Like I accidentally left my glasses in the fridge for like 3 days and couldn't figure out where they were. I'm a moron. I don't know why anybody would listen to anything that I have to say. I'm dumb. Go find out for yourself. Figure out how to get accurate information, source methodology, like exercises in logic, rational thinking. Like those are the things that we need to teach in school. Right now, we're just teaching, this is science, this is social studies, this is history, this is English. Here are topics. Here's information on those topics. We're not teaching anybody. This is why we know that this is accurate information. This is how we get to the point of discerning that this is what's worth presenting to you. They're just presenting it to you, and you have to take it for granted that whoever has determined that it's worth it. And people aren't like that. They'll go out into the world and find something that's contradictory to that and don't know how to do any sort of source methodology, and will just accept it because it feels better or looks better or is in accordance to the group that they're with, or hear other people say that it is, or it was presented to them in a narrative that makes sense, which is why a lot of storytellers are very, very popular. Like the Ben Shapiro's of the world are popular because they're compelling and charismatic storytellers that say things that make sense.
You're so spot on about that. And people need that. It's easy to take in information that's handed to you. But I do have to say that when I learned how to learn, which that sounds so silly, but it's true. When I learned how to learn, I could spend 2 hours learning things and it would be the same. I would be exhausted afterwards. The same as if I took in a textbook and read what I needed to know the answers for the test that was coming. I could do that for 6 hours and be just as exhausted if I did 2 hours of learning to learn. But I also hold on to this stuff because I don't know how to explain that. I think that my hunger for learning only grew. And now, like, the more I take in, the more I realize I don't know anything. And now I'm just hungry for more because I know how to learn now. And that is, I'm 43 years old. That's within the last 2-3 years, that this happened. And I think that that's what's missing, is teaching adults, children, our grandchildren, everybody, that learning to learn is the coolest part about, we're mammals that can think nuance. That's crazy that we can do that. And I think learning for me has been this whole new adventure. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I just, what's that about? Well, let me find out, first of all, if I should learn about it. Let me find out, what do we know that is the truth? And then when I do, then I'm like, oh, wow, this really checks out. I can't wait to find out more. And that was never given to me. I went to Temple Christian Academy for many years as a elementary school student, which is TCA, the same school system that Seth Andrews went to. The red, white, and blue, the American flag, everything was red, white, and blue. Mm-hmm. You would think spending that type of money on a school, the school I went to was kindergarten through 12th grade. We had an in-ground pool. We had tennis racket. We had everything. But
wow.
No, we weren't taught how to learn. We were taught, these are the things you need to know for the test that's coming.
I didn't get that until I went to university.
Well, see, that's I want to change so much about that. I think that there are so many people, not just Americans, people, that if they were given the opportunity to know those things, like how to learn, I think that, and I'm only speaking for myself, that they would want more. They would want more, and you wouldn't be able to stop them.
And look at the decisions people make based on what they're told too in society in general. Like, by the time somebody is in junior high school, I think that they should have a research methodology course and a critical thinking course.
Yes.
Research methodology and critical thinking should be mandatory courses in all public education. They just should be. I don't know why they're not. It's bananas to me why they're not, because you're constantly presented with studies about what will or will not cause cancer, or what is or is not good for you, or what you should take based on what doctors say. And you're forced into a position where you have to take it for granted that they're the professionals who know, when the system is built in a way that you can manipulate that mandate, because professionals aren't always professionals. Like, I did a series on Christian counselors who have PhDs that they can put on their wall, right? Yeah. Like, they have PhDs, but they're illegitimate garbage PhDs, because there's this underbelly of this like private school system where there's paid degrees. Like, you can essentially just be like, here's $3,000, can I have a degree? And they'll be like, here's your degree. And you can just say you're a doctor in whatever the actual hell. And there's so many variations of doctor that the average layperson doesn't know how to discern what pertains to what you're talking about and what doesn't, and what methodology would you use in order to come to your conclusions.
Right.
And how do I ascertain that they're accurate? Like, everybody having a research methodology course, so that when somebody says, this essential oil is good for you because there's this study, they can actually look at the methods section and go, actually, there's all of this, like, you didn't have a control group, and also like you didn't use an ANOVA at all, even to analyze.
So many years.
Right. Yeah. Like if and critical thinking, like if people were just taught, hey, assess everything, like figure out what to measure things against in order to find out if they're accurate, or you're being fed a load of garbage. But there's entire industries that are built against the fact that people aren't taught that, like marketing industries. I took marketing. Like it's essential. There's entire industries that are built towards manipulating people because they're not educated in how to discern information. Like, it doesn't benefit the system to tell people how to discern information. So I like to teach people to be more discerning with regards to information. People are so much more interested in being right about the things that their group says is right, that feel good to them and or piss them off or don't, and not at all interested in finding out how they know they're right.
Yes.
Go find out how you know.
That sounds conspiratorial in many circles. Like, I go into, some of my mom's friends, it would sound conspiratorial to say the system doesn't award critical thinking. The system would rather you don't. They would rather you think that baby powder causes cancer.
Everything causes cancer, and also doesn't.
Right. Or there are chemicals in your everything's chemical.
No chemicals?
Not anything in this room right now that's not a chemical. But we're not taught that. And so for like people like Mac and I, who would like for the conspiracies of the world, that there really are conspiracies of the world, but not everything's a conspiracy.
No.
And it is tough when you don't have critical thinking and you have been fed the information you know as knowledge. And I'm
just like in Bible school when you fed the information.
Yeah, a lot of it's rote memorization. Like,
which puts me to sleep. I'm not.
That's not how I learn.
Nope.
Oh.
Not how I learn at all. Yeah.
All
Doing, listening, and writing about is how I learn things. Writing about and talking about. More so talking about.
Yeah. There's a little bit I wanted to piggyback on, and I got to backtrack a little bit because I didn't want to interrupt. You had mentioned the internet and how, we like more or less weren't ready for all of the information that's now thrown at us. Like all the information that we have access to now. Like we haven't quite like evolved even to like just learn how to hone all of it really. But something else that we haven't really adapted to yet is the other thing that the internet brings. But this is also one of the best things about the internet. And this is kind of why I think, even though it's brought a lot of like bullshit and like laid it upon our laps.
Oh, amazing. I've only ever had positive experiences.
That's it. All those fires.
Everyone.
One of the best and worst things is how you can connect with people so much, and what you can hear about other people. Like I'm learning more about like indigenous people right now through the internet, and that's neat. That's very, very neat. And like I'm learning things that I never learned when I was younger. And I'm interacting with more and more people. Like I used to be on that same bandwagon of like people with internet friends. People with internet.
We're internet friends.
We are internet friends. Like I have some of my best friends on the internet, and we can talk for hours and hours about things that we commonly like to talk about, and that's wonderful.
Because you're not just restricted to who's available in your general proximity.
Right. Exactly. And that's wonderful. But also at the same time, the flip side of that, and not the flip side of just like the crazy people we have to interact with, but the flip side of how we talk to other people, because we are only used to talking to like our families and a few close friends that we have to interact with all the time. That's just how it's been for centuries. But now we can interact with anyone from anywhere with any beliefs, and we don't quite know how to do that yet. Like, there are very few people who have your skills.
I don't have skills. You guys are giving me way too much credit, and it's starting.
We just want your head. No, I understand, but like, you understand what I mean when I say a lot of people can't navigate through a conversation like you can and listen. That is a difficult thing. I try. Like, I'm sure you feel like you haven't mastered that, right? I haven't mastered that, but at least we know to try to do it. And so many people don't even know to try to do it. Like, that's something else that I think needs a little more focus. Like, yes, our education is broken. Yes, we don't know how to process all this information, but also we don't know how to talk to each other.
No, we don't know how to communicate
very well. And like, just kind of want to end that thought on the only people that are going to be like left here in like the next 100 or 1,000 years or whatever is like whoever can adapt to the climate change and process information and talk to people. Like, only like superhumans are going to exist, and they're going to be so advanced, or we're all going to be dead. But that said,
so sad.
Okay. Existential nihilism, it helps.
Right.
It's fine.
God.
You're free. It'll end sometime. It's fine. It's fine.
My mind just went to Australia.
Oh, not just in Australia.
I know.
Our poor existent boy.
Billion animals are gone, you guys. 1 billion animals.
Over 1 billion.
Gone.
We almost have no more koalas.
Are endangered.
I just can't with that. You saw the pictures of the
disgusting.
koalas walking up to people who are on their way out, and they're just like, "Please give me water." The people are, emptying their. Just put them in your car.
It's so sad.
And continue evacuation. There's no reason to talk.
Grab the damn koala.
Just grab it and go. I've heard they're like pretty like crazy. Like, they'll get you, but also
I would let them.
I try to just just take it.
For the sake of their existence continuing?
Yeah, for the sake of their existence, please.
You could literally be grabbing what might be one of the last koalas on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, you really could.
The ruse, save the ruse. I mean, there's only one place that koalas and ruse live.
Yeah.
Save them.
Wallabies.
And it's on fire.
How are the platypuses?
Oh, they're so cute. Talk about what are they called? What is it? Transitional species. That's I mean, we all are, obviously, but platypus is if I were to imagine a transitional species, it would look like a mammal that lays eggs. Like, come on.
That's the atheist's worst nightmare.
The platypus? Let's make that our mascot.
We should put a platypus on our graphics. Okay, so I don't want to keep you all night. Yeah. So I do want to try to press forward a little bit
I do
more.
have to take my son to soccer in 6 hours.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so
I'm glad you didn't drink tonight.
I had one.
Oh, you have some wine?
Because I saw him grab booze. No, it was rum. I grabbed rum and Coke, but it was this much rum. I mixed it in a mason jar so I can measure it.
Okay.
It also fits a full can of Coke, so I don't have to do it half a can of Coke. And my metal straw, because I'm a hippie. Because I'm a hippie.
We have a whole bunch of non-disposable straws. I'm with you. We have every color. We have different.
They're a pain in the butt to clean because you have to put the things through them. But
it's like having a vape bottle, like vape bottle again.
So there's a lot that I wanted to go over with you, but I will try to narrow it down to, because if I had to guess, you would be a staunch advocate for like human rights, like not really anyone in particular, just like human rights as
Generally.
a whole. Like you are pretty like humanist, and I know you do focus on like a lot of like feminist issues too, but that's also that just falls in the bucket of humanism, and I love that. And then also free speech and education. If I had to guess, like if you were going to go into anything concerning like any kind of political discussions and how should we solve this way, those would be the three first topics that you may want to talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe that may be
Am I
fair.
close?
Yeah. It's,
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think education,
Yeah.
freedom of. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No, I think
When
that's
I
fair.
think of
Cool.
Shannon, when I think of Shannon, I think of human rights.
Yeah.
Free speech.
Yeah.
Conversationalist.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one that I think would be most appropriate for us to talk about is speech. I want to know where you lie on speech, because I'm sure you've heard my views on it before, listening to the show a little bit. Do you need a refresher a little bit where I'm at?
Sure. Yeah. No.
on
Let me go.
speech?
Let me know.
Oh,
Let me know.
Okay. Because I try and figure out where my resolve is, like where that line is, if I can draw one. So mine is, and I hate saying it as much as like, because I try to be principled, I'm more or less okay with hate speech. Like I don't like it. I think it should always be pushed back on, but it should be allowed to be said. I think where that stops, where that line is where you call for violence or doxing or anything like that. That's where you draw a line. That's where you should get authorities involved. Is when someone could potentially cause harm. If it's, but if it's just like Black people, blah blah blah, yes, that's awful. It should be pushed back on, but you should be allowed to say it. And I think people should have representatives who represent that view, because those people exist. And God, I hate it, but they exist, and I do believe in democracy, so I have to.
Telling them to shut
principled.
up doesn't make them think differently. It just makes them quiet.
Right.
And makes them quiet and mad. I would
And
rather
insurgent.
somebody be loud and I know who they are and potentially be able to influence change in their mind or change the mind of the people that they're influencing than them be driven underground. That to be said, I think there's a line between, the right to say something and the right to a platform. Now, would I put somebody on my channel who has Nazi ideologies, even though I'm combating them? No, I wouldn't. Absolutely not. No, I wouldn't give them that opportunity. Not a goddamn chance would I give them. Would I bring somebody on just for the sake of debating them if they say that, trans people shouldn't exist? Nope, not a chance. Absolutely not. I would not. But if I met them in a public space, I would engage them. And I would be glad to hear that they were able to let me know who the hell they are, so that I had the opportunity to engage them and counter them, instead of them just finding spaces to propagate with the people who think like them or that they want to think like them without me having that opportunity. Yeah. Because otherwise people won't hear those counters. Because if you don't have anything to counter, the people who might be on the fence don't hear the counter. They only hear the message that they're looking for without the counter.
Very true. Right. And platforming is like a whole like section of that.
That's more complex, I think.
It is. And it's very important, because I think of it as like two different sides. Like someone like Matt Powell, when we had first more or less
I've talked to him.
That probably
Twice.
a couple times. Yeah. I remember.
I was there when he said that the sun. Oh, what did he say? That the reason the sun was so hot was because air is different in space.
Yeah, all that air in space really makes
I think he literally reached into his butt and just pulled that one out. He was like, and because space.
Right.
Sorry, 3 times. Okay. Oh my God, 3 times. God damn it. Sorry, keep going. Sorry, guys.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Because specifically with him, he's a difficult one because he's one of those ones who, if you're on his platform, he will take your words and do whatever the fuck he wants with them.
Yes.
And he's upfront with it. But also, if you go back to when he started, I feel like we probably shouldn't have platformed someone like that in the community. But now that he's much bigger, there's smaller channels to cover him. That's a good way. Like, he's a good platform to ride, to like tear down on the way up.
Anderson,
like.
all of them are. All of them.
Yeah, Anderson is.
Depravity.
Yeah, so I guess to me, it depends on how high on the food chain they are. Like,
I've had that conversation a lot with other. Yeah, like a lot of content creators think a lot about this. Like, there's a group of us that are fairly well
you have to
interconnected because we have like goals, right? And we have these conversations from time to time about, you know, we saw this reprehensible thing, but it's only got this much. And like, we could really effectively counter it, but is it worth it? Am I just going to be propagating? Like, so a lot of us have kind of come to this sort of determination that always punch up instead of down, like figure out how much harm they're causing. And if you engaging them has the potential of mitigating that harm, like if you're doing it because it's salacious and that will get attention, then that's not necessarily the right decision to make. Like, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Dangerous. Yeah, his ideas are too dangerous for it to be, I want to go in this and win points.
No, yeah, you need to go against it. And we were fairly effective. Like, we been bastard banned from Navardia had like it helped us, like, and a bunch of other smaller creators stepped in, like Shay from Atheist Rationale, and like it wasn't even just the big creators that were involved in that. Like, that was a community effort. Like that was a community effort. That was just a showing of what a community can do when everybody bands together and understands that you need to have like goals, right? Like, that made international
squad goals
headlines. Like, we got his funding cut off for, I think it was like 15 of their churches in the end lost their PayPals. They just didn't have funding. Like, so if you can have that sort of effect
as it happened.
Sorry?
Oh, so I said, I remember telling Lindsay about that as it happened. Like, because I was like trying to share links out and like help with that as much as I could, which wasn't a lot.
Helped.
But yeah.
No, that helped.
Because everyone, like, if you can do a little bit, it does. So
rising tide.
Yes.
Yeah,
Every single second of the spent.
Well, for a lot of things, I say, what would Noam Chomsky do? I always, WWNCD, always. Because he's just such an anti-war. Like, there's no reason to go to war unless you're defending yourself. And he stands by that. And I've learned so much from him. There's only been once or twice where I'm like, I don't really agree with that policy. And then I read what he knows about it. And I'm like, okay, maybe I do. So, for free speech, I love that he said, if you don't stand up for the right of your most loathed enemy's right to say what they want, then you don't understand free speech. Because there will always be people in power. And one day it might be someone who doesn't agree with you. And that just really hit home. And I thought, wow. Now, I would show up if 200 Nazis are going to show up somewhere, then make sure you have 20,000 that show up to counter. But no violence. Our voice and ideas need to be louder and smarter than theirs. And I really like that he said that. And it made so much sense that, someone will be in power someday that doesn't agree with you. And you want the right to be able to say and march and do whatever you need to do as well. So,
yeah. And just because you can't hear what a group of people are saying publicly, it doesn't mean that they're not saying it. It doesn't stop them from saying it. It doesn't stop the ideas from existing. It just removes your opportunity to understand that perspective and formulate effective counters. And that's dangerous too. Like, if you are forced underground to formulate these ideas, and people who are vulnerable and susceptible don't even have access to counters because your message hasn't been countered anywhere because no one's ever really heard it. It's just that there's nothing available to them for them to access. Of somebody refuting what you have to say, then you can accumulate people and damage those people. Like, you want to protect people, you should want free speech so that you can create a library of counters to every shitty idea everyone's ever brought up.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, and you think of these fundamentalists or radicalized young teenagers that go across the globe to go fight in ISIS in Syria. They have never heard a real counter argument. They've been radicalized, and since they're underground, there's nobody that's going to show up and say, hey, have you thought of it this way? And it doesn't. No, I think that I'd rather them not be underground. I would rather it to be out.
And what if there is no free speech? And like you said, enough of those people accumulate enough power, and they use the same laws that you use to relegate them into the margins, to now relegate you into the margins. Like you need to project into the future. Everything isn't always going to be like it is now. You can't take that for granted. Yeah.
Even for just self-preservation reasons, you need to have that, like, you need to have the most free speech as possible, because if it's ever flipped on you, you need to have that open. Like that's one way that I think about like each policy that I try and think about. It's like, okay, what if flipped? Fuck, maybe I need to change my views a little bit, because I don't want to screw me either. But obviously there needs to be a balance though. Something else I wanted to say, if I can remember.
I do have to go relatively soon though, because it's midnight where I am, and I have to leave in 6 hours to take my kid to soccer. I'm so sorry.
I understand. No, it's okay. And I need to wake up in like 7.5 hours.
I'm the coach of his team too, and there's 3 games tomorrow, so I need to be able to to take care of 10 children in 6 hours.
Okay. Well, I will sum up a couple things. I don't think.
But I'm happy to come back at some point in time if you want to talk again.
Of course. We would always love to have you on, always. So that would be wonderful. I do want to say because when I was rebuilding my worldview, was like I still am, but like when I was in like those early moments after you lose like your religion and then you start to care about politics, a whole stretch.
And then you come on Twitter. I remember when you came on Twitter, and I was one of your first followers. I'll never forget it.
You were, and I loved it. And when you were just like slamming down Red Bulls and like slapping people with Bibles.
That's how you found me. Yeah.
Hardcore.
Yeah. I was trolling. I was trolling. I was on Hammett Meta's post.
Yeah. I found you on Twitter, and then I listened to you on I think it was Steve's the Let's
Back
Talk
then
to
it would have been
Shannon
either Steve, Godless Craniums, Heathen Hour, or Apologia.
Yeah, because you were all over the place. So yeah, you were, and like behind the scenes. But one of the things that I remember you saying, talking to Max Colby, or Dean, whatever you're saying,
whatever is by today.
When he was being shut down for whichever reason, whichever time, is that you don't agree with what he says, but you'll fight to the death for his right to say it. And I think that really stuck with me. And it was sold on me more later down the road, but I specifically remember you saying that, and maybe being one of the first people that I heard say something like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, that should be common sense. I completely agree with that. But I feel like I didn't really hear it before you said it. But it should be baseline. It should be baseline. And I definitely agree with that. And it was cool to have that speech conversation with you. That said,
thank you.
The other thing I wanted to point out is that
sub to Shannon.
Or Jay, sub to me.
Sub to Shannon.
Are you scared?
I put out content sometimes, periodically.
Sometimes. There's no schedule.
It's worth the wait.
Yes, it is. It really is.
I
Subscribe,
have a video
hit
I
the
recorded
bell.
yesterday, so there'll be one out within the next 3 to 4 days. So yay!
So
I'm telling off Ben Shetler from Creation
Oh.
today because he and I got in a fight.
Good.
Ooh.
Yes.
I know. I'm excited. Now I'm
He
excited.
deserves it.
So now everyone knows why Shannon Q,
Yeah.
the high priestess of sexual humanism, is one of my favorite people on
Yeah.
this big third rock from the sun. Now everyone
Hi,
knows.
men.
Hi, men.
When I told Stacy that's how you ended it, she about fell out of her chair. She was like, I love that girl. It's amazing.
I did.
This is great.
In the name of AIG. I
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yes.
We will let Shannon Q go.
I'm sorry.
Super duper
Oh,
appreciate
you're
it. Please
fine. Mommy
like,
first.
subscribe. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes.
Shannon, do you want to say our catchphrase on the way out?
Yeah.
I don't
Stay
know if I
humanist
remember
for
your
godless sake.
catchphrase.
Stay humanist for godless sake. You could do it.
Say humanist for godless sake.